All right, number 3, here we go. This is comparing your MSP. So you've got your list of MSPs that you've brought to the table. If you haven't seen that video, it's the video right before this on the playlist, so take a look at there. But now it's how do I compare an MSP to an MSP to make a great qualified question or answer, I guess. And, it can be a little daunting because sometimes they get a little technical. And transparently, the more technical they're getting, those are warning signs. But here we go. I like to do the whole 1 through 10 scoring thing. So, you mark, a particular area, and we'll talk about some of the areas that are important to you. And I'm going to give them to you, but I think it depends on your company and your priorities of what you put first and what you put last. So I'm just going to give you the areas, and what you can do is score them next to it as 1 through 10. That way, you can make a completely educated decision. So here we go with that. So my suggestions of priority, if you will, would be number 1, cyber. This is kind of one of those extinction event moments, meaning if you or the MSP gets hacked, you could go out of business. They could go out of business. They could take you out of business. So being aware of that. And so, you're looking for standards, and you're looking for auditing of those standards within the MSP. If they cannot describe what is in their cyber stack, by the way, I'm talking about their own internal controls, not necessarily what they're selling to you at this point, then you must have a problem. And it's scary to me how many MSPs I've seen that don't even have their own house in order. You have to check this. I know it seems like they, of all people, should be most tuned into this. You'd be scared, so start there. Number 2, their ability to enhance your business through their technology. Right? So they start asking business level questions of, how you do business, maybe bringing ideas to the table, how they can take the technology that they rep and bring it to your business to make, productivity better, increase margins, those kind of things. I love the idea of references and finances. Ask them for a list of references, preferably inside of your industry, and then ask them for their audited financials. Not all of them will have it. Not all of them will be able to provide it, but a lot of times they're going to run a credit check on you, so is it not fair for you to run a credit check on them? You want to make sure that they're there for you long term, and you might making, initial investments that could come back and haunt you if they're not in business long term. Then you must have compliance. So if you're in a particular line of business that has compliancy, then can they sit at the table with you and help you answer those questions? Can they speak your language, your industry language? That's very key. So you can start feeling that because you know your language of your industry, and you should start feeling that from them. Then you want to talk about availability, service level agreements. Physical location could be a big deal. Maybe you need local service and they are a long ways away. That could be an influencer because you're going to pay every trip. So understand that. But if you're a 24/7 business and they don't offer 24/7, that could be a problem. Maybe you only want 8 to 5. It's not as big a deal, but that could be an influencer here. Redundancy and recovery. Okay, what am I talking about here? We're not talking about what they're delivering to you, but think about it this way. We did just go through kind of a COVID, which is, a bit of an issue for a lot of companies because they didn't have the redundancy pieces to, be able to serve their customers. But imagine this, look, I'm in Kansas. And so imagine that a tornado went through Kansas and wiped their building out. Would they be able to still service you? If they're a super small shop, the answer might be no. But ask them for the recovery plan. They should be able to provide you a detailed step-by-step plan for all kinds of issues, everything from, emergencies, whether it be, weather-related, maybe even cyber-related. They should be able to provide you a complete guide of how they recover themselves. Obviously, that's a great guide of telling you how they will respond to you. Price. Obviously, you got a tough price, right? Like, you're not going to buy somebody that's twice as expensive that delivers the same value. So make sure you get to the price piece of this. So how do we deal with that? How do they price? Do they price per user, per computer, per application? Whatever their model is, ask them how they price it. And why does that matter? A great example would be a hospital. A hospital might use one computer per patient room, but then have multiple nurses that come through to use that through different shifts and things. So depending on how they price could influence that pretty big one way or the other. Be aware of that. Do they have the gold, silver, bronze package thing? Are they making recommendations? Understand like your options of those. Just because they have those doesn't make it bad. It's just you need to understand what the value differences are between them. I will tell you that they're probably trying to push you into silver or gold, duh. But, make sure you understand where the maximum value is for you as purchasing. Then there's, is pricing like simple to understand? I love quoting Einstein on this a lot, but if you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand it well enough. That worries me a lot because I've seen these pricing metrics where like 1 through 10 equals this, and 11 through 22 equals this, and then if you have ABC application, it's more. If you do cloud, that's an additional fee, and then by the way, if you want this level of service and this SLA, and look, you're trying to buy IT services. You're trying to make your life simpler, not more complex. Then there are other limits. One of the most recent things I've seen here recently was up to 10 hours on site per month, something like that. Well, then this particular customer I have in my mind, what ended up happening is they went over that every month, and that's on them. Well, the whole point of MSP, as we've talked earlier, is about risk management. Well, the MSP has put the risk on you. That's not going to work. So making sure you understand the limits of their agreement. Are there onboarding fees? That's kind of one of those things that can sneak in there. And, if you compare pricing, you want to know if one has an onboarding fee, one doesn't. I can change your pricing on that. Remember risk, who has it? We talked about that just a second ago. So the more risk you take, the lower the price should be. Duh. And then one of the other things I like to talk about here is trust. Does this provider make you feel comfortable? Do they reduce your concern or increase your concerns? Are they selling on fear, uncertainty, and doubt? It can be okay if it's real, but if all they do is cause anxiety on your end, it might be a warning sign here. Do they have a customer portal where you can look up your ticket statuses, you can look up the level of service, you can hold them accountable to the services they've guaranteed you to provide? Professional organizations have that. So, okay, we've talked about price. Now, a couple of the other things that I like to do to qualify an MSP against the other ones. Call their help desk. Do they answer? I know that seems silly. You'll be amazed how many times that you can call people and they don't even answer the phone. They have the, we'll call you back thing. Well, if you're running your business and you're down, what are you going to do? Wait for them to get back to you? That's a real problem. How quickly they get back to you, and then do they outsource their help desk? Not necessarily a bad thing, but you probably want to know. And if you have compliancy, that could be a concern. So just be aware of that. How quickly do they get you a quote? Speed matters. Is your sales rep responsible, reliable, relatable, all those things so that you can feel like you can communicate your needs to them? They understand your business. They react when you send an email versus 2 days later. Pretty important stuff in today's world, so test the sales rep a little bit. If possible, do a trial, right? Okay, what do I mean by that? That's tough, right? You probably can't get a full MSP trial. But maybe you need, a new firewall. Have them put the new firewall in. Maybe you need a new PC in one of the offices. Have them do that. See how the experience is, because this is one of the weirdest industries I've ever seen. From the standpoint that what happens is you buy, and then you're asked for a 3-year commitment, and you've never done business with this person. It's like you have a 2-week dating period for marriage. It's crazy. So pay attention to those kind of things. Make sure you understand it. All right, next. I love to stop by and ask them questions, in their office. Maybe that you've gone by and you've done a visit with them, but you've got the best version of them. Just do a stop by. Say, hey, I got a question. Boy, it'd be interesting to see how that response happens, right? So try that out. All right, my next level of things is get your formal presentation on your final quote. Ask them to present it to you so you fully understand it. Now, look, a bad presentation doesn't mean a crappy MSP, okay? Sometimes we have to look past that, and, if they're technically driven, you can probably get a kind of a really technical response. So you've got to look past the presentation, but what you're looking for is thoroughness, understanding of your business aptitude, and EQ. That's what we're looking for in the presentation. And so, did they put your recommendations in the room of things they should be changing? Do they provide you some documentation of what they discovered? That would be kind of things I'd expect. And then do they use your industry language? We talked about that just a little bit earlier. All right. This next one is my warning signs. Things that should make you go, uh-oh, or, well, what 90s things that make you go, They give you a price with no discovery. So if they're going to take on the risk, but they didn't do any discovery, isn't that a warning sign? I would sure think so. They accept that whatever you tell them you have, and they don't quantify it. Look, I've done this long enough that most people have no idea what they actually have in their network. Heck, in my house here, I've got over 100 connected devices. Could I name them? Not even close. And so somebody should do discovery to make sure that the price is right, so there's no surprises on either end of this agreement. Then, are they too cheap or too expensive? Right? Like, those are warning signs. What's going on with that? And I think just the pure fact that they're too cheap or too expensive should worry you. What's too cheap? I would say anything under $100 a user. What's too expensive? Probably anything more than $300 a user. I know those are generalizations, but just be aware. And then, do they take too long for anything? Meaning getting the proposal back, doing the discovery. Because when you're in this dating phase that I referred to earlier, if they take a long time now, do you think it's going to get better when you're an actual customer? No. Finally on this, do they give you a wrong answer to a question? Instead of saying, I don't know the answer to that question, they end up giving you a wrong answer. I know I didn't give much qualification for that, but be aware. If that happens, run, because they lied to you. Not acceptable. All right. The final thing, the proposal stuff. What should be in their proposal, and how should you compare them? Price is clear and right up front. The number of users, the number of seats, or whatever they price for is clear and up front. Cyber inclusions, cyber exclusions are clear and right up front, especially when you're comparing providers, which is what we're doing here. What's one provider have versus the other, and ask the questions why maybe they don't have something that the other provider has. A great example of this in today's world is SIM, which is Security Incident Event Monitoring, I believe. If you're not having compliancy, you may not have a need for SIM. So you might be paying for something that you don't need. So be aware of, kind of comparing those things out. Software is defined. What are they providing? What are you providing? What is a support? Like, if you have a line of business application, I always love to use, like, if you're in the car repair business and you have a line of business application that helps you quote this stuff, do they support if it doesn't work? So let's be clear. I don't expect them to teach you how to use the application, but if it physically doesn't work in your environment, then they should be able to call the provider and be you for the day to help mitigate those issues that you have a support package for. So make sure you're clear on that. And then, the final piece of this, support levels, 24/7, 8x5, it's in writing, on-site, off-site, all of those kind of things should be comparisons. All right, some of the things that I've seen that can be tricky. What happens if one of the provider asks for the other provider's proposal? Well, a great NDA, which if they've done disclosures with you, non-disclosure agreements, you shouldn't have the right to share a proposal. So be prepared of what you've agreed to and what you have not agreed to. I've seen people remove pricing and just put the documentation. How do you make it fair? I don't know. A couple of ways to get answers that, especially if it gets technical. One, do you have a friend that knows this industry can do it for you? Two, do they have a non-compensated, non-commissioned person on either staff that can review the proposals with you? I wouldn't let them walk away with it. That's my opinion. but they can sit at the table and see both and see where the gaps are. 3, you should write enough of an RFP, if you will, just requirements of what you're asking for them to propose, that it gives them guidelines, and they might make recommendations on both sides. And if somebody makes a recommendation that thinks good, then maybe you propose that to the other provider, say, can you provide that? Now, with that said, don't forget, the company that made the recommendation that you think is good, give them some credit for that, for sure. And, okay, what happens, with the game of, you need to sign by Tuesday or the price goes up. You need to make a decision or else this thing, and this thing is going to happen. I don't like threats, and there's usually sales tactics behind that. Now, if you're going to, Windows 10 is coming in here soon, so if Windows 10 is coming up and they're like, hey, support's coming up on this date, like, that's a fact. There's nothing that provider can do about it, and you probably ought to activate. But if it's simply, just pricing or different things, like, don't feel pressured into making those decisions. However, larger providers will be quarterly driven and therefore be trying to close, so you can use that to your advantage. All right, that's how you kind of compare at the surface level. The next list of things that we're going to come back to is going to be more around some of the individual components. So we're going to specifically talk about pricing. I mean, we're going to dive all the way into pricing. Everything from pricing out monitors, PCs, laptops, all that stuff, to the services associated to cybersecurity. We're going to deep dive into this, and there are some real tricks. I'm going to share one of them right now that I've personally used, so I'll just own this one. But like, a great sales strategy would be put the price on things that people can understand so they can shop it, and put the margin really low, and then keep your margin in other things. Well, a monitor is a great example. Here's a part number, here's a monitor. You can look that up on Amazon, on CDW, call it what you will, and you can compare their price. Well, it's probably they're baiting you to check the prices that they gave you the part numbers on. The rest of this stuff is really difficult to price out, including things like laptops. For example, I happen to be using a T14 here. That's a Lenovo model. Well, that's a series, not just a specific model. So if you're comparing a T14 to a T14, you might be getting a bottom of the line to a top of the line. We're going to talk about warranties. We're going to talk about extended warranties. Probably not a great idea to buy, just Steve's opinion and the data supports that. But next time we're going to talk about pricing. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next video.